Oh man, it's so good to be here. I don't have any inflatable animals with me. I almost brought a 5-foot inflatable elephant, but I just didn't think the talk was what God wanted for this group. But raise your hand if you've ever felt called to something. All right. Raise your hand if you've ever struggled with clarity on exactly what that calling is, even though you feel called to something. Well, a lot of hands. All right. How many of you have heard calling described as a feeling? As you're talking with someone, they're like, why do you feel called to this? Or why are you called to this? And they describe it as a feeling. Show hands? All right, great. Because it's mainly a feeling, how many of you have a hard time, even though you feel you called, how many of you have a hard time articulating what that calling is? You feel called to something, but how do you articulate what it is you're called to? A lot of hands, right. That's the most common response I get from a lot of people when I talk to them about calling and discerning God's calling is they feel a pull or a draw to something, but they can't articulate why they feel it or what exactly it is. And so I'll be honest, I got to a point in my life where I didn't really believe in this concept of calling. I worked at a Bible college for 5 years. I would talk to tons of students, and they'd come back from a mission trip. Maybe they went to Turkey. And they'd come back from a mission trip and I say, how was Turkey? It was awesome. It was so great. God did this, God did that. I feel called to Turkey. And I was like, well, why do you feel called to Turkey? I don't know. I feel called. And then a year later, they're like selling insurance or something like that. You know, they didn't like go get called there. So what's going on here? So I got to this point where I was like really just jaded. I just like, maybe calling. I see it all over the scriptures, but maybe for today, there isn't this calling, right? We're not seeing burning bushes and things like that are calling people to things. So I kind of put calling on the back burner, and then I had this job as a youth pastor. We had just bought a house. It was down the road from my parents, free babysitting. I had an in-ground pool in the backyard. I had a job that I could do, and then a mentor was calling me, asking me to work with him at this church in a place I didn't really know anything about called York, Pennsylvania. It was just this annoying place I had to drive through when I wanted to get to Hanover or Lancaster, right? I didn't know anything about York. Why would I want to go there? I've got a great job in the town I grew up with free babysitting and a pool in the backyard. And I told him I'd pray about it. How many of you have told someone you pray about something, right? Okay, so we're praying about it, and I'm like, God, if this is calling, if you're going to be calling me to this, please help me understand what is calling. And so I took 6 months to pray about it, okay? 6 months to journal, to read, to talk with mentors, to pray. And through my journaling, God just revealed this model of discernment to help me process this idea of calling. And so I wanted to talk with you guys about that today, because if you work with youth, one of the things that you're going to be doing is helping them discern God's calling for their life, helping them discern the voice of God and what they're going to be moving into. And so the model that I'd like to introduce is called Top Calling. And I'm at the point where I do believe calling exists for everybody. And so I believe 100% every person has a purpose, right? And we don't need to rely just on the Bible for this truth. Everybody look around the room right now. Look around the room and pick an object. Look for one object. Everybody got that one object identified? Jess, you're staring right at me. What did you pick? Guitar. What did you pick? Exit sign. What did you pick? Carter, right? Speaker. All right. Every object that you're looking at that you picked, you can identify what it is and you know what its purpose is. The exit sign tells us where we can get out of here in case there's a tornado warning again, right? The speaker amplifies sound, right? These chairs hold people. We could sit down. Everything in this world that you can identify has a purpose, and you are not an exception. The students you work with are not an exception. They have a purpose. Right? Now listen to this. There's some common moments of frustration is when things, items, objects don't work as they should. They're not fulfilling their purpose. You pick up a marker to write on a whiteboard and the marker doesn't work and you throw the marker down. Why are you upset? It's because the marker's not fulfilling its purpose. It's not doing what it was made to do. Pick up a microphone. It's not amplifying your sound through the speaker. Something's broken. You're frustrated because it's not fulfilling its purpose. The same is true for us in our humanity. We are wired in such a way that we are to exist with purpose. And when you're not clear on your purpose, when you don't understand your purpose, you distract yourself with pleasure. How many of you know teens who play video games for 13 hours a day? When I was a youth pastor, I talked to this one kid and I said, hey man, we had a beautiful weekend. What'd you do this weekend? I played video games for 13 hours. 13 hours, right? Why do we waste mountains of time on things that just help us numb out or make us feel good? It's because we're not sold out on what our actual purpose is, right? So I want to give us a framework, 4 important things that we're going to pay attention to in our lives. It's a way to read our lives and see the hand of God on our lives in such a way that if we pay attention to these 4 areas of life, we can get a better understanding of God's calling, God's movement, God's leading and directing in our life. Now, when I say this is a model for discernment, it's not a formula. All right, this isn't A plus B equals C for calling, okay? This is an area, this is things that you can read in your life, right, that are gonna just be for discernment. All right, so the first one is, well, I'll just go over the TOP, stands for talents, opportunities, passions, and that God gives us this unique bundle of talents, opportunities, and passions in order to meet needs in the world. Everybody say needs in the world. The Bible describes that as good deeds or good work, right? So we are created on purpose, for a purpose, to meet needs in the world. All right, so my basic definition of calling, if we're saying, okay, what is calling? Is it a feeling? My basic definition is that you have found your top calling, your highest calling, when talents, opportunities, and passions meet the needs of the world. A little longer definition, if I could unpack it a little more, would be God-given talents are released through your opportunities to meet needs in the world that you are the most passionate about, all right? So how many of you, just hearing this explanation and this definition, already feel like you have a clear understanding of the components of calling? Raise your hand. Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes, maybe yes? Okay, well, we'll go into needs. The first area is meeting needs of the world, all right? Every job you can think of, every career that you would go into, anything that you can think of is broken up into these 3 categories that I think so far. Producing something, maintaining something, or repairing something. So there's things that are produced, solutions that are solving problems, maintaining things like environments and schedules, and then doing the work of repairing. Right? So when you think of meeting needs in the world, they all fit somewhere in these categories, or you might do 2 of these combined at whatever role you have. But there's problems that need solved, there's enemies that need defeated, books that need written, relationships that need mended, houses that need built, and on, inventions that need created. And so there's all these needs in the world around us. In Matthew 5:14, Jesus says, let your light shine, right? You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine so that people can see your good deeds by meeting needs so that they may glorify the Father, right? And so the part of our calling is to meet needs of the world. And here's the most beautiful, I love this overarching theme in Scripture. God is inviting you into a partnership with him to meet the needs of the world. Flip through the pages of your Bible. Whenever God wants something significant done, he always partners with a human agent to do it, right? So he goes to Moses and he says, I have heard the cry of my people. I have seen their slavery. I'm going to go free them, God says. Now you, Moses, go talk to Pharaoh. I don't talk good, Lord. Okay, well, I'll give you the words to say. Well, can I take my brother Aaron with? Yeah, okay, take your brother. But so God is the one who's going to be doing this work, but he's inviting Moses into partnership. We see Jesus doing this with the disciples as well. And so for you, as a youth leader, we're going to have time to discuss this. How are you helping your young people sense God's invitation in their life? How do you sense God inviting the people you work with into relationship, partnership with him to meet needs in the world? And I'll just say right here, you can fulfill your calling wherever you're at. All right, we're going to talk specifically about how do we get to our top calling when all these areas are really nice and mature and grown, right? But let me tell you this, how many of you believe that the greatest spiritual gift that Jesus had was not washing feet, right? But there was a need. He's at a table with people who are arguing about who's the greatest. No one washed their own feet. No one washed each other's feet. And Jesus said, I'm going to get up and meet this need, and I'm going to show you how to lead while I do it, right? So you can meet needs wherever you're at. If you're working at McDonald's, you can meet needs. You can fulfill your calling because you're not just flipping burgers and dropping fries. You're there to show up and listen and to invite people into community and to create a generous presence, right? But we meet these needs by using the talents that God's given us, all right? All of us here have a unique bundle of talents. This is how we are wired, equipped, and gifted. Now, I'm going to be giving you about 5 weeks worth of content in 20 minutes, so I'll explain how you can get more information on this later. But wired is your personality. How many of you have taken a personality test in here? Say yeah. Yeah, so we've got the Enneagram stuff, we got the Myers-Briggs, the DISC assessment. Get online and find out what kind of Disney princess you are. We got all these kind of tests that tell us our personality stuff, right? Next, we have your skills and abilities. Are you naturally athletic? Do you have a great singing voice? Are you good with numbers? Are you good with musical instruments, right? There's natural skills and abilities that you have that are used to meeting needs in the world. And then finally, under talents, is spiritual gifts. If you've ever taken a spiritual gift assessment, say yeah. Yeah. So we want to be using all of our talents to meet needs in the world as part of our calling. God has created you as his masterpiece, Ephesians 2:10. You're created in Christ Jesus to do good works that God prepared in advance for you to do. And we do them with our talents. 2 things you can help students do, 2 things you can do. Number 1, grow in self-awareness. That's why we take those assessments and those tests, right? We got to grow in awareness. How am I gifted? What are my natural abilities? Number 2, stewardship. Got to do something with them, right? We got to be a good steward. We got to show up and put in the work. We got to put in the time, all that stuff, right? So one thing that we'll talk about here in stewardship is that all of our gifts and talents are given to us in seed form. All of your gifts are given to you in the form of a seed, right? And so you need to work on these things. There's a book I read called Atomic Habits. And the author says, all of us are created differently. We all have different gifts. And you don't have to apologize for these differences or feel guilty about them, that you don't have the same gifts somebody else has. But you do have to work with them, right? You might be as tall as Michael Phelps, right? You might eat the same amount of calories. But if you're not swimming 6 miles every morning in an ocean, you're not going to be winning any gold medals, right? So we got to put our talents to work. Very appropriate here is talking about the parable of the talents. There's a great story about 3 people, servants, whose master went on a vacation and went on a trip. He said, I'm going to give each of you these talents. One went to work right away, doubled the talents. The second one went right to work right away, doubled it. The third one, what'd he do? Anyone shout it out? Buried it in the dirt. Didn't do anything with it. All right, so as we recognize our talents, we become aware of them, we got to put in the work. Part of our job is helping our young people put in the work, shape the path for them to put in the work of these talents. All right. Phil, where am I at on time? When did I start? Okay. What's that? I know I'm good, Fernando. I just wonder how much time do I have left? All right. How do we release these talents into the world? I'm glad you asked. Through opportunities. You might be the greatest basketball player in the world, but if you do not have the opportunity to play on a team, you're never going to do anything with that talent. So as we are growing with our talents, as we're becoming stronger, as we're becoming smarter, more refined, we've found our niche, right? We need to be praying for, and as youth leaders, we need to be creating opportunities for young people to release their talents into the world. And I break opportunities up in 3 different areas here: roles, resources, and relationships. All right, every opportunity kind of revolves around these things. When you think about roles, it's like, what kind of power do I have? My ability to act. And then authority. Do I have the right to act? If I want to release this talent in the world, I better look for a role that allows me to flex, that allows me to use the power and ability I have, and gives me permission to do that. Hey, you need to have, I used to not care about roles when I was young in ministry. I'm like, I don't need the title of pastor or anything. I'm just going to be a leader. Well, in some situations, you got to have a title for people to listen to you, right? You're not going to be able to marry anybody if you don't have the pastoral or ordination clearance stuff, right? So there's work that you want to do in this world, and you're going to have to get the appropriate amount of authority. All right, next we have resources. We live in a resource-rich world, right? Time, money, energy, education. How many of you in here know how to read? Raise your hand. Hopefully just get everybody moving here. Yeah, all right. How many of you are currently reading a book? Okay, not every hand. But so I heard this quote once that if you know how to read and aren't reading, you're not much better off than someone who's illiterate. All right, so are we using this resource? Are we leveraging it? Right? The problem is not that we have a lack of resources. The problem is that we're not very resourceful, right? So these exist as opportunities to help grow and release your talents in the world to meet needs. It's part of our calling. God is also going to put in your life relationships. The young people that you work around, you are a resource for them. You're an opportunity for them. You are a relationship to them. They have other opportunities like teachers, coaches, pastors, counselors, right? We've got a room full of youth leaders here. Like, this is a great opportunity for them that's going to help them grow spiritually, grow in maturity, socially, relationally, right? Very important that you guys see yourselves as an opportunity for them. One more link in the chain that God has put in their life to help grow them. All right, next we have passions. Now I'll say this is probably the most misunderstood area of calling in our culture. How many of you heard a quote or seen maybe you walk into an office and you see a poster on the wall and it's got someone on like a fishing boat and the sun is setting and it says, follow your passion and you'll find your purpose. And you look at that poster and you're like, yeah, I just got to follow my passion and I'll find my purpose. That is so unhelpful. Not very helpful at all, right? So how do I even know what my passion is? How do I know what I'm passionate about? How can I take an assessment, like a spiritual gifts assessment for passions? Like, I don't think there's anything out there like that. How do I know what I'm passionate about? And are the things that I say I'm passionate about, am I actually passionate about those? So let me ask you guys, just if we could think of like a word cluster, what other words come to mind when you hear the word passion? How do we understand passion? What are some words? Just throw them out. Feelings, nothing more than, yeah. Feelings is one. Say it again. Striving, yeah. Yeah, sacrifice is a big one. Say it again. Perseverance. Excitement, drive, yeah, motivation, drive, determination. Sometimes when our world thinks about passion, it has those words in there: love, happy, strive, determination, sacrifice. Sometimes we just think of passion as this romance thing. It's like we're reading a romance novel is where we think of passion, and maybe like a Latin lover, and he's like, Maria, I am so passionate for you, and I love you. And so there we have this passion, we have with this idea of passion being with romance and love. The word passion was never associated with romance until like the early 1900s. The literal definition of passion, where we get our word for passion comes from the Latin word passionem, or passio. Literal definition of passion means to suffer, to endure suffering. We got sacrifice. I see you're getting boom over there. Yeah. So if you're really following your passions, you're actually following what you're willing to suffer for. And Matt spoke earlier. Matt, the verse you used from the passage, say that Greek word out loud again, spaghetti or something like that? Splachna, yeah. So this word splachna, when his heart went out to her, when Jesus saw her, he was like, there was passion engaged, splachna, right? When Jesus saw the crowds, he was moved with compassion because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, right? And so he had passion for them. He was willing to suffer for people because he was so passionate about them. That's why when you guys think about the movie, The Passion of the Christ, right? The literal definition of passion. That whole movie was about torture and crucifixion. So that movie was focusing on true, literal passion, suffering of Jesus. And so what does this mean for calling? Are there things out in this world that you are willing to suffer for to see happen? Are you going to help awaken true biblical passion in your students as they're pursuing God's calling for their life, saying if you really want to see this happen in the world, you're going to have to sacrifice for it? And so I don't think there's any assessments out there, but as I've been studying passion, I created my own little passion scale, right? So passion might start out as curiosity. Hey, I'm interested in this. Hey, do you want to go on a mission trip? Do you want to go to the James Project? Just sign up for it. And you go to the James Project, and there's some excitement there, and there's enjoyment. And if I had more time, I would just walk through the whole scale. Please don't try to take notes on this. I'm just going to fill it up real quick. Boom. So all these words that help grow passion into maturity, right? We got excitement, enjoyment, and then all of a sudden boredom sits in. Like, I'm putting in the same reps day after day, coach. We're doing the same drills day after day. But that boredom then has a purpose, and you develop perseverance. You're committed to it. There's some dedication there, right? You put discipline in your schedule to practice things. There's obstacles that'll come up to keep you from fulfilling what you want to do to meet the needs in the world. You go through pain, sacrifice, and eventually God is calling us to suffer for the things that he cares about, for his kingdom. Now, passion isn't all suffering all the time. There's going to be moments where it's just, hey, right now, I'm having this really fun excitement and conviction. And I love being convicted about this because it drives me. But at some point, if you're passionate enough about something, God is going to be asking you to sacrifice for it, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's your own life. And whenever a young adult comes into my office and I talk with them about calling, I say, hey, what are you passionate about? They'll tell me what they're passionate about. And they'll say, how much has that cost you? How much have you had to suffer for that? Right? Next, just want to end our time by saying these three areas of talents, opportunities, and passions, they're not all completely grown and intersecting in perfect ways, right? When you're like 11 years old, you're just like high passion. I call this the Mickey Mouse phase, right? And I think that we go through seasons of calling where, hey, I want to be an astronaut one day. Well, you got this high passion about it. You got stars on you. How many of you had stars on your ceiling in your room when you were kids, right? You got stars on the ceiling. You got books of constellations and space travel. But you got, NASA's not calling you for an interview. You don't have that opportunity. You don't have that talent. So this is the dreamer phase. Right? You might meet people in the world that you give them an opportunity that they say they're passionate about, but they have no talent grown there yet. It's just a seed. So this is a really good developmental season of calling to help them grow their talent. And on, we see all these different variations of talents, opportunities, and passions, and how these different seasons of calling could shape how you mentor, how you invest in a student, depending on what season they're in, right? There might be a developmental season. There might be a frustrating season. Probably the most frustrating is here, this last one: high talent, high passion, no opportunity. I can't find that role. I can't find that person, that relationship that's going to help get me this job, or the resources I need. I know I could do a good job. I'm passionate about meeting this need, but God doesn't seem to be opening up a door. How do you help mentor and disciple a student in that season? All right, so eventually the goal is for all of us to get to this point where we have surrendered ourselves to God. We've become self-aware of who he's created us to be. We know what our high talents are, and we've developed them. We've been good stewards, right? We've been growing our passion, becoming aware of the things we're willing to suffer for and sacrifice for and give our time and energy and money for. And then also God has generously provided an opportunity to release all that talent into the world in partnership with him to meet a need. And that's where you'll feel like your life is the most full of purpose. You'll be buzzing, feeling so alive, even during hard times. And I think this is what Paul talked about when he's getting shipwrecked and beaten with rocks and chased out of towns. But he's so passionate about the gospel and teaching Christ that even though he's meeting these needs against opposition, he's feeling joy because he's sold out to purpose and he's not distracting himself with pleasure. So my goal for this fall is to write this in booklet format for seniors who are graduating high school. You know, how many of you have given senior gifts before to students, right? It's usually a journal or a Bible or a piece of jewelry. I would love to develop some kind of booklet to help them understand their next step. What should I do after high school? What should I do after college or career or otherwise? So, if you'd like, I have more information about all this stuff. Just come talk to me. But for now, we're kind of moving to some discussion. So we have these 3 questions. We'll talk about these for about 7-10 minutes, and then we'll move on to another set of questions. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to be here. God bless you.